Hello, and welcome back to BAAS 4100, Managing a 21st Century Career. I'm Professor Bailey, and this is the Week 4 module where we'll be talking about projects and teams. This image is me in front of Galileo's house, just outside of Florence, Italy. I spent 2 months in Italy last year, which would be 2019 summer. I highly recommend that you travel outside the United States, get some work experience outside the United States. And in Italy, I spent the first month in Florence in a language immersion program. A great way to start some travel. I lived with a family for several weeks and then lived on my own. And then was in class every day to learn Italian. And it was a great experience. That I highly recommend. I'm also kind of a math geek or a science geek, and so to be able to take this selfie in front of Galileo's house is kind of cool to me. All right, so let's get started. In Module 4, we're focusing on project and team goals. We're going to look at some best practices, some study and research about how to create the best teams, how to be a better team player, and how to achieve the best teamwork. This week, you are also asked to conduct your first team meeting with your project team for the business project for the course, and then to create a contract which will establish common ground rules and guidelines. Some of our readings will also give us some insight into the impact that automation and artificial intelligence is having on jobs in the job market. There's a great TED Talk, very amusing and short, and I think some great communication tips that we're going to be looking at. You should be starting the business project with this team meeting and establishing a project plan at the beginnings of that with your contract. And again, I want to reiterate and re-emphasize piano, that if you do this work step by step and be intentional about it, that the workload gets easier and you, in my opinion, will produce a better product. And this works in all areas of our life, from college to career, etc., step by step. Our first reading was an article in the New York Times looking back at how Google spent a lot of time and energy and resources evaluating what makes a successful team. Some of the interesting things that came out of here was a HBR review article that said that the time spent by manager and employees in collaborative activities has ballooned by 50% or more over the last 2 decades. So more and more of our work is spent in teams in most cases, or project teams or collaborative teams. And so knowing how to create a great team, be a part of a good team, be a good team player, can really make us much more effective and efficient and really have great impacts on our upward mobility in our career. Groups tend to innovate faster, they see more mistakes more quickly, and they tend to find better solutions to problems. And this, of course, is comparing it to individual work. People working in teams tend to achieve better results and report a higher job satisfaction, which I imagine for many of you, this is contrary to what you find. In almost every course I have where I put people into teams, there is almost an immediate groan heard. Teams can be tough, and that doesn't stop once you leave college and move into a work environment. Working on an effective team, it can be very difficult. Google did a lot of research, and one of the things that they found was that understanding and influencing group norms were a big part of influencing or improving their teams. And this is what distinguished the good teams from the dysfunctional teams, was basically how we treat one another. Speaking of the treatment, what they were talking about, some things that teams did, one thing was that team members spoke in roughly the same proportion, and they had a good, what they called social sensitivity, and that they were good at kind of sensing how other people were feeling based upon their posture and their tone of voice, etc. So they were sensitive to the mood and energy of people around them. Okay, this is a great article. Spend some time in this article. It's got a lot of great pointers and a lot of great insight into teams. On the screen, you'll see a prohibited sign, the circle with a slash through it. And I put that here because I wanted to let you know that this is a horrible slide that I created. And one of your major project deliverables is to create a PowerPoint slide. And I want you to see that this is a bad slide. There are too many words. If I was in front of a group, they'd be trying to read this while I'm trying to talk, so it would be very distracting. So while I've created this slide, this is not a good slide. So take note of that when you're building your own slides. Slides should be more bullets, and when they are bullets, there usually shouldn't be a paragraph with them, which is what you really see here. Our fun reading for the week, again, continuing in the novel, The Alchemist, we just went another 10 pages forward. And so again, we're kind of taking this a step at a time. And here we witness mainly a discussion between Santiago and the king that he bumped into in the city square. And they had a great conversation about discovering your personal legend, and specifically that this is the most important thing to everyone. And a personal legend is just, your dream or your destiny, what you always wanted to accomplish. And in this section, it talks about how when we're young, we kind of know our personal legend, and maybe our personal legend shifts over time, but we seem to know it because we're not afraid to dream and to yearn for anything and everything. But as time passes, he says a mysterious force starts to take over, which kind of starts to dim that dream and makes us think that it's impossible. And yet, the king also speaks to the fact that this dimming, this force, is actually what makes that dream come alive, because you have to work at it. He also suggests that to realize your destiny is a person's only real obligation. And I thought that was an interesting thought, that fulfilling your mission, fulfilling what you believe you're here for, your purpose, some greater sense in your work and life. If you focus on that, then I get the sense that other things will fall in line with this kind of thought. There's also another great story which I loved for many years in this book, and it's when a shopkeeper sends his son to talk to a wise man to find out the secret to happiness. And the wise man lives in a grand castle and sends the boy away to look around the castle to see all the wonders in it. And but while he does this, he gives him a task and says, he puts a couple drops of oil in a spoon and says, "Don't spill any of this." Well, the young man walks around the first time and is so afraid to spill anything that he doesn't notice anything in the castle. And the king chides him and says, "Hey, this is a great place. You really need to see it. So go look again and make sure you see everything." Well, this time the young boy walks around and he sees everything. He's very excited and forgets all about the oil in the spoon. And so when he comes back, the oil is gone. And the king says an interesting thing to him. And he says, the secret to happiness is to absolutely see all the wonders of the world, but never forget about the drops of oil on the spoon. I'm curious what you think the oil in the spoon represents. It's a great metaphor here, and I think it's a great mirror for us each to hold up. And especially as we get older and we get tied down to responsibilities, our responsibilities may take a greater amount of our time and attention than our enjoyment or our amazement at the world. And I think that's what he's suggesting here, is that both have a place. If I focus only on enjoying myself, then maybe I end up homeless, living under the bridge, because I haven't taken care of responsibilities to take care of myself and my family. But if I focus solely on the responsibility of my family or myself, then I kind of can easily lose the sense of wonder and amazement at the world. Kind of the all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. But all play and no work, is the story of the grasshopper and the cricket. So I thought this was a great story and something for us to hold on to. I'm hoping you're enjoying this reading, and we're going pretty slow, so it shouldn't be a big burden. Our next reading was from an article about 10 high-paying jobs that will survive the robot invasion. And so automation has been around for a long time. The Industrial Revolution, etc. But some things that came out of this article were specifically about robotics and artificial intelligence. And that one of the things that was stated was that 42% of the Canadian workforce is at high risk of being affected by automation over the next 10 to 20 years. Realize that's half of the population almost. So what kind of jobs that you do and what you're about to move into careers, some things may be drastically affected. I was reading an article recently that was talking about that artificial intelligence has greatly impacted the jobs of lawyers. Many lawyers start out doing legal research, and this is how they enter into the field of law. And artificial intelligence and machine readers, etc., can search through and scan through documents, at light speed, relatively, compared to what a newly graduated law student could do. And so this is creating a huge cut in the number of work opportunities for that field. The article also said that the jobs of the future will demand 3 key elements, that automation will take over the more routine things, but that STEM education, creativity, and emotional intelligence will be things that will be key differentiators for jobs that we hold on to and of higher level jobs. It gives a caveat in here too that it's all not doom and gloom, that even during the Industrial Revolution, people thought that machines would take over all the jobs and that people would be left unemployed, and some people thought that was great, that we'll let the machines do the work and then we'll live a life of luxury. But certainly we haven't figured out any financial models or economic models that make that work, at least as of yet. Then there was a great thing, a nice link in there, and I think you should definitely, if you haven't done this, make sure that you do. And it's by National Public Radio, and you can put the job that you're looking for, the industry or the job that you are interested in doing, and it does a check to see how impactful robotics and artificial intelligence will be to that career field over the next decade or so. So I think that's an interesting thing for you to look at. And this is certainly something that you want to be aware of as you're plotting out your career. What are the impacts of technology, and specifically robotics and artificial intelligence, which is, many are calling the next wave of technology? What is that impact on your career, your career future? Continuing with this, there was a rather long article from, I think this was from either Atlantic or the New Yorker, about the age of robot farmers. And this was an interesting article. It focused largely on the strawberry farming industry, and couple things going on here that, this huge debate about immigration has impacted migrant workers and the ability to get them. And then also, there's some insight here about how technology is changing and improving. And as you read through this article, it's fascinating to see that much like an inventory in a warehouse, farmers are now inventorying their plants, and to the degree that GPS combined with inventory type software can pinpoint every single plant that a farmer has, even in huge farms. So there were some interesting things here about this evolution, or maybe it's a revolution of technology, again, in the workplace, and specifically in this case, in roles that have typically been manual labor. Will they continue to be? Then we had a great TED Talk video. I really enjoyed this. Celeste Headley, I think she's very amusing, and to me, she was spot on. With 30 plus years in business and meetings, people do not know how to communicate well. I would start with number 10, be brief. Throughout this course, you're going to be suggested that when you have interviews, you prepare answers to tough questions or regular questions, and most answers should be 1 to 2 minutes long. This is how long you should be probably speaking in a meeting when you're making a response to someone, etc., and not pontificating and going on and on. This ties directly into 7. Try not to repeat yourself, going over the same thing again and again. And then also number 8, staying out of the weeds. You don't need to give every single piece of the history and story to make your point. And so much the way that we are focusing on, or I'm trying to help you focus on, making your communications tighter and shorter and more concise, your language and your spoken word needs to do the same thing in a professional environment. You will be greatly appreciated by your peers that you are not the talker, and that you are effective and efficient, not only with your written communication, but also your verbal communication. So definitely listen to Celeste and pick up some pointers here. Our first assignment here is our team discussion. And what you see there in the upper right is the sample, the example that's given to you. In your discussions, I want you to use these as a forum to practice writing succinctly. I want you to write in an email style. Bullets are great for email. Being short. If your email is over a page, chances are it's not going to get read. It's just too much. You want to be short, you want to be sweet, you want to be factual. If it's judgments, then you want to be backing them up with some kind of rational thought or a piece of data. Okay? When you're doing the analysis here, you need to have good, clear thoughts that make sense, that show that you are actually thinking, and then be able to explain or articulate why you think a certain way. Again, this idea of using, if it's an opinion, how do you back it up with either a rational argument or specific data? The next thing we have as an assignment this week is your team contract. And this should be, or could be, your first official team meeting. And I know that you're in a difficult space because this is an online class. And what I want you to know is that it is very typical what's happening. I've worked in a number of situations where I had to work on virtual teams, where I worked with team members who were not in the same location as myself, and yet we had to do work together. So, this idea of you working on a team when you're not in the same location is not unusual in the workplace setting. Your first meeting here is about establishing norms, establishing guidelines, setting the tone, handling tough issues, or deciding how you're going to handle those before they become an issue when it's much more difficult to figure out a plan. When are you going to meet? Trying to meet regularly so that you keep this ball rolling, so that it is an ongoing project and project plan. There is a leader that will rotate every week. Each person in the team should have several opportunities to be the team leader. That's clearly explained in this document. And also just setting the tone for working together, trying to build those relationships, etc. I'd like you to use in the team discussion, there's a list of icebreakers. I'd like you to use one of those icebreakers or several of those icebreaker questions as you start this first meeting. And maybe you'll want to do it as you continue on, just so that you can continue to encourage the social side of the project team while you're focused on the work side as well. That tends to be the lubricant sometimes to make things go better. Also note that this is the beginning of a project plan. You really do need to have a project plan because you have a serious deliverable due in about 10 weeks. And I've actually built assignments in here to kind of force your hand to be building some of those parts all along the way. So you can look at those project deliverables in the calendar, in the syllabus, etc., the online syllabus, that is. So enjoy your week. And as usual, things are due on the Monday of the following week.